You wake up tomorrow and nothing feels different. The light still filters through the window the same way, your phone still rests where you left it. The world hasn't ended in a single dramatic moment. And that's the problem. You check the time. You reach for your phone. No signal. At first it's irritation, then confusion, then a strange quiet pause where your brain waits for something it expects to arrive. You don't panic yet, because panic isn't the first reaction. Waiting is. You wait for confirmation, for a message, for a familiar voice to tell you what this moment means. And when nothing comes, something subtle begins to shift. Here's the unsettling question. What happens to human behavior when the systems that tell us what's normal go silent? Not when buildings fall, not when alarms scream, but when order simply stops responding. You notice it in your body first, a tightening behind the eyes, a restless scanning of the room. Your brain isn't asking, "Am I in danger?" It's asking something far more basic. What usually happens next? Because most of what you call calm, morality, patience, or restraint isn't internal. It's borrowed. Borrowed from routines, from schedules, from the invisible agreement that tomorrow will resemble yesterday. Society doesn't just organize behavior. It predicts the future on your behalf. And the moment that prediction disappears, the human mind begins searching, urgently, for something else to follow. Not truth, not ethics, but signals. This is the contradiction we don't like to examine. The same mechanism that keeps civilization stable is the one that, when removed, causes it to fracture with terrifying speed. At the center of societal collapse is not chaos, it's predictive failure. Modern neuroscience describes the human brain not as a passive observer, but as a prediction engine. It is constantly forecasting what should happen next, then adjusting behavior to minimize surprise. This is known as predictive processing. Under stable conditions, the brain leans heavily on external structures, laws, timetables, authority figures, social norms, economic systems. These systems act like environmental organizing structures, reducing cognitive load. You don't decide whether stealing is acceptable every day. You don't renegotiate traffic flow at every intersection. You don't reassess trust from scratch with every stranger. Order makes behavior efficient. But when that scaffolding disappears, the brain does something ancient. It defaults to threat optimization. The amygdala increases sensitivity. The prefrontal cortex, responsible for long-term reasoning, loses influence, causing decision-making to become faster, narrower, and socially reactive. At the same time, another system activates: social mirroring. Humans are not built to interpret uncertainty alone. When prediction fails, we look sideways before we look inward. What are others doing? Who seems confident? Which behavior appears safest to copy? This is not weakness, it's an evolutionary adaptation. In unpredictable environments, imitation increases survival odds, but imitation has a cost. It transfers responsibility. Yet, when systems vanish, the responsibility doesn't disappear. It diffuses. No rules doesn't mean no structure. It means structure is rebuilt from behavior itself. Quietly, rapidly, and often brutally. Here's the part that feels uncomfortable to recognize. When society collapses, most people don't immediately become violent. They become directionless. But this does not make them neutral. Without external order, empathy doesn't vanish, but it becomes expensive. Trust doesn't disappear, but it becomes selective. Morality doesn't end, but it becomes conditional. You feel this shift not as cruelty, but as permission. Permission to prioritize proximity. Permission to protect the familiar. Permission to narrow concern. History shows this pattern repeating with unsettling consistency. During blackouts, supply shortages, Disasters, revolutions. The first fracture is not infrastructure, it's shared expectation. People stop assuming help is coming. Then they stop assuming fairness. Then they stop assuming humanity is mutual. Not because they want to, but because uncertainty punishes hesitation. Philosophers have long noted that civilization is a thin layer of agreed-upon predictability stretched over ancient instincts. When that layer tears, humans don't revert to savagery, they revert to efficiency. And efficiency stripped of systems has no conscience, only outcomes. This is the quiet horror of collapse, not that people become monsters, but that ordinary people, making rational decisions under uncertainty, produce outcomes that feel unrecognizable. You notice this mechanism when systems fail in smaller ways. You see it when traffic lights go out and drivers hesitate, then inch forward aggressively, copying whoever moves first. You see it in grocery stores during shortages, where panic doesn't begin with hunger, but with observation. Someone grabs more than usual. Another follows. Soon, restraint feels naive. You see it online when platforms change rules or moderation disappears. Voices get louder, language sharpens, group identity solidifies, not because people become worse, but because signals replace structure. You see it in workplaces during leadership vacuums. Decisions stall. Informal hierarchies emerge. Confidence becomes authority. You see it in public silence. When no one speaks, the first voice sets the tone. And once the tone is set, deviation feels dangerous. You see it globally when systems strain, borders harden, groups contract, narratives simplify. Uncertainty demands compression, and compression eliminates nuance. This mechanism shows up whenever people ask, "Who's in charge now?" and quietly answer, "Whoever acts like it." Not morality, not expertise. Visibility. Collapse doesn't reward kindness or cruelty, it rewards predictability. People follow those who reduce uncertainty, even if the certainty is false, especially if it's false. Here's the truth that lingers long after the scenario fades. Society is not what keeps humans good, it's what keeps humans predictable. When systems function, you feel like your choices are yours. When systems disappear, you realize how many of them were borrowed. This doesn't mean awareness makes you immune. It means you can observe the pull without immediately obeying it. You can notice when imitation replaces thought, when urgency replaces reflection, when certainty becomes more attractive than truth. The collapse isn't the moment systems fall, it's the moment people stop waiting for them to return. And if you're paying attention, you can see the early versions of that moment everywhere.
What you heard isn't a theory, it's a pattern, one that hides inside ordinary moments, routine mornings, familiar signals, and the quiet belief that order exists without effort. This pattern isn't something people like to see in themselves, because it exposes how fragile their certainty really is, and how quickly it depends on something external. Recognition doesn't require permission, it only requires attention. Be sure to subscribe and leave a comment below, and in the next video, we'll examine another pattern people choose to avoid, not because they're unaware, but because the truth is uncomfortable.